Welcome to another episode of the Business is Blumin podcast. I've got a very special guest with me today. He's a proud immigrant. He's a real estate investor. He is Jim Lee. Jim, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show, Daniel.
Sure, awesome. Really happy to have you. Really think you have a great story to tell and excited to share kind of your journey with the listeners. But just to get started out, as I mentioned before, similar to me, you are a proud immigrant and emigrated from Taiwan. So would love to know how it was like growing up in Taiwan.
Yeah, growing up in Taiwan, it's definitely a great experience because I get to see a world outside of the United States.
Mhm,
I moved here when I was 11 years old, so
mhm,
I lived there for a good 10 years, and it's Taiwan is a beautiful island.
mhm.
We The nickname for Taiwan is actually Formosa, and that's my company name. And
Awesome.
it's basically, back in 1500, the Portuguese discovered the island before it was named Taiwan, and then they named it Formosa, which means the beautiful island. And ever since then, that's our nickname for Taiwan. It's a tropical little island. It's very humid. It reminds me a lot of South America, Central America.
Mhm.
If you've ever been out there, the weather is kind of crazy. It could be bipolar. One day could be raining, like it's pouring, and then the next day would be sunshine weather. So
Mhm.
that's a little bit about Taiwan, and the nightlife out there. Food is amazing. That's the number one thing I would go there if you were ever a tourist to visit Taiwan. I would say the food is the go-to. Boba came from Taiwan. I'm not
Oh,
sure if you're
interesting.
familiar with boba milk tea.
Very
Uh,
familiar. Yeah, big.
milk
Sorry to interrupt, but there's a big out here in like outside Philadelphia. People love bubble tea, milk tea. So very familiar with boba, but awesome to hear.
Yeah. So that's where it came from. But yeah, if you guys ever visit, definitely check out the nightlife. Because at night all these street vendors come out, and you get a lot of different great varieties of street food, deep fried food, baked food, anything you we want, it's there. And I think the number one thing what makes Taiwan attractive for tourists is also because Taiwanese people are very hospitable.
Mhm.
They're very caring and so forth. So you'll get that kind of vibe when you go there. So that's another thing that's worth visiting. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say about Taiwan.
Got it. Awesome. No, happy to hear. Really interesting and great stuff. Appreciate you sharing, especially all the traveling stuff. And it sounds like it was a interesting place to grow up. But another step in your life story, at about age 11, if I'm not mistaken, you moved from Taiwan to the United States. So we'd love to know kind of what the rationale behind that move was and kind of what some common struggles were adapting to a new country were.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough that my uncle from my dad's side had already been in the United States. I think they live in Carolinas, I believe. Yeah,
Mhm,
and so they applied for us. We waited about 7 years to get approved for us to come over with green card to get
mhm,
for through our uncle's application. And my dad had always wanted to move here because just like most people, they think that coming over here it gives us more opportunity. Like you can chase
mhm,
what is so-called the American dream, right?
mhm,
Because your hands are not so much tied behind your back. You have the freedom to choose to build your own business. It's a lot easier.
mhm,
Over here than it is in Asia. So him being an entrepreneur, he always wanted to give us a better life, and I appreciate. I'm like really grateful for everything that all the sacrifices my parents have made for me.
mhm,
So that he brought us over, and the move that the move was so it was pretty smooth, but it was challenging for me because my parents moved us to a little city called Palmdale, which is like an hour and 20 minutes away from LA, Los
mhm.
Angeles. So it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in the desert. It's super cold at night,
Sure.
hot during the summer. There's like no Chinese people, no Asian people out there.
Mhm,
And so the reason why we moved out there is because cost of living is cheap, and my dad wanted to force me to use English because he knew that if I lived in LA, I would constantly use Chinese, right?
mhm,
So after that, I basically through his his help, I was able to get rid of my accent. And for me as a kid, I always thought that I hated to come here. I hated to learn a new language. What am I doing here? and I lost all my friends too. But looking back now, I'm like super thankful for everything
Mhm.
that my dad's done for me.
Got it. Awesome. So, quick, two following questions there. Are there a lot of Chinese speaking folks living in LA, like the main LA area?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. And the other thing that I wanted to get into, how did you know any English moving to America at all? Or like you just came here totally from zero and somehow through watching TV or speaking were able to learn it?
So in elementary, in fifth grade, we start to learn ABC, like the alphabet,
Mhm.
because it's mandatory for, I guess, Asians to learn English as second language. It's one of the most powerful language on earth. So,
Mhm.
um, so I started learning ABC, but I was just giving a name Jim. So I've used that since then. And so I got a name and I started to learn my letters,
Mhm.
and that's it. That's the only thing I knew when I came here. So it was still a bit of a struggle.
Got it. Awesome. Interesting. So you just kind of learn naturally through speaking with folks and just through school over time, somehow were able to pick it up.
Yes. So I watched a lot of cartoons.
Okay. A lot of people learn English that way.
Yeah, and yeah, I learned the most by putting myself in an environment where I'm forced to use that language. It's either I
Mhm.
learn or I hide in my little shell. So
Mhm.
you guys choose, pick and choose your
Got
battle.
it. Interesting. And the other thing, how did you get the name Jim? You said it was assigned to you, or kind of, what was your name before Jim? Would love to know the dynamic around that.
Yeah, so my legal name is actually Shen Chen Li.
Jim
Um,
for you.
yeah, so Chen is not really pronounced Chen in Chinese because my Chinese name is actually Li Shen Zhen.
Mhm.
So Zhen is the way they use that and then they kind of just translate into like a word that sounds like that in English, which comes
Mhm.
out to be Jim, right?
Got
So
it.
that's
Okay.
the easiest. That's how I got.
Okay. Got it. So the pronunciation was similar to Jim, and that's how. Okay,
Mhm.
got it. Interesting. Cool to hear that. So another step in your life story. You know that after growing up, kind of after moving to LA and getting a little more acclimated, you chose to go to UCLA. Would love to know, why you chose UCLA and kind of what you enjoyed about your time there.
So I'll have to be honest on this topic. I went to school just to please my parents because growing up, I was raised with that mindset that you got to go to school, you know. I don't know if you ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but the idea of go to school, get a job, pay off your debt, invest in stock market, mutual bonds, and all that, and live comfortably. That's
Mhm.
that's what I guess that's how my parents imagine a perfect life.
Mhm.
But for me, growing up in our era, that's not what we believe in, right?
Yeah.
It's like a different generation thinking, different generation mindset, right? But I totally get it. Having education is good if you are looking for, to get into a special trade. For example, being a doctor, being a
For sure.
lawyer, being a dentist, and so forth. Yeah, you do need to go to school, get higher education for those type of, you know, career. But for what I do, what I've always wanted to do is be an entrepreneur because I look up to my dad. Right?
Mhm.
It's natural instinct, and so like you know, I just it was always there was always a friction between me and my parents where I wanted to pursue getting start to work, start to get some
Mhm.
experience because I know that matters more than a piece of paper at the end of the
Mhm.
day. But that's not how my parents see things. So I went to UCLA because both my sister and my brother went to UCLA, and so I was pretty much, I was pretty much put in that bucket where I gotta go. I must go. It's mandatory in a
Mhm.
sense, and that's what my parents wanted me to do to get high education, and also their mindset is different, right? Because growing up in Asia, we're trained, like I said, our culture is trained us to wire to think that higher education is the way to go. It provides stability and so forth. But when since I grew up here, I'm more Americanized. I see
Mhm.
things differently. So I and that's why I got into. We can get into more of this topic later
Mhm.
on as we dive into deeper. Why I got into real estate syndication is this is all part of the reason. I was able to shift that mindset from a poor mindset to rich mindset by educating myself through reading books and studying about more about real estate, and that's how I've changed, and that's how I've also changed my parents' mindset. It was tough. It took 7, 8, 9 years. I don't even know how long, but it's achievable.
Got it. It's an interesting thing actually regarding the whole going to college education thing because I've had a lot of conversations with friends about this. I think similar to what you said earlier, if you're going to school to do something, some kind of higher education field in medicine or maybe a lawyer or anything else that requires extended education, totally understand the necessary extended schooling there. But for I'll call it the less technical majors, doing something in business or something else, respectfully, it seems like undergrad could be reduced to 2 years. I don't know why they keep us there for 4 years. I think the big classes people should learn are accounting, finance, some of the kind of basic strategy ones, but it definitely feels like education could be much more consolidated than it is today for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's there's trillions and trillions of dollars of student debt. It's
Mhm.
just absurd just to think about that.
Yeah. And then the
That
number,
many people's in debt.
definitely. And the number's going to keep growing. The money machine go burr, and then fortunately, that's how it goes. I don't know if it'll ever stop. I think just the national debt is going to keep growing and growing until there's either some kind of religious and divine intervention or kind of the world explodes. But one of those two things. But awesome, really insightful to hear about that. So kind of back to what you were saying earlier, learning a lot of this stuff and really trying to educate yourself through books. Ultimately, I know that you got your first job at LoopNet CoStar. Would love to know a little bit more about that situation and kind of some of the things you learned in that role.
Sure. So, like you mentioned, so I did obtain my economics degree at UCLA back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you may know, that was after the sub 2008 subprime mortgage crash, followed by the 2010 European debt crisis. So it was a really difficult job for me to find a job, anything for me to work coming out of college. Um, but eventually, I was able to, fortunate enough to land a job as an inside sales rep at LoopNet. And so, for those who aren't familiar with LoopNet, it's basically Zillow for commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, through that job, I was able to speak to real estate investors, agents, lenders, property managers on a daily basis, and I learned the importance of having multiple stream of income.
Mm-hmm.
So I started acquiring real estate for additional passive income, and eventually I built a sustainable real estate portfolio where that I managed to break away from my W-2 job and started a career in real estate syndication.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Interesting. So, kind of through your job at LoopNet Star, you were able to connect with a lot of folks in just the real estate world in general, working with them as clients. And through that, you were able to really get involved in investing primarily, right?
Yes.
Got it. Awesome. So, as you made that transition from working your W-2 job to kind of doing real estate primarily, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced early on as you were just getting to learn all this stuff and really learning the nooks and crannies of real estate investing?
Yeah, so I could give you an example. Um, when I bought my first property back in 2015, it was a short sale. It
Mm-hmm.
took me a year to close this deal, cash offer only, and it took a year for the bank to finally approve the price that I bid on, but they
Mm-hmm.
wanted 10,000 more a year later. So there was a bit of a negotiation. I managed to close it and for 1,000 more, and so the deal it was good. It was a really good learning experience because before this had happened, the challenges I had in the W-2 world was that I was laid off from LoopNet because CoStar had acquired LoopNet, right? All the LoopNet people started getting laid off, and then move on to a different company called Living Social, right? Living Social Groupon. I don't know if you're familiar with that
Mm-hmm.
space, but it used to be really popular 10 years ago. It's a deal website where you get like 50% voucher and so forth to use at restaurant businesses and so forth. And that company went down under,
Mm-hmm.
and basically we I was laid off again. And the challenge for me was that was the breaking point because I actually didn't acquire real estate yet when I worked at LoopNet. I acquired after I lost my second job. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like this is I have to create an additional source of income in case this
Sustainability.
happens again. Nothing is safe. No, you can't expect to have a stability for the rest of your life. Something's gonna
Mhm.
bound to happen, right? So that's when I bought this property, and I went in just not knowing anything. Even though I worked at LoopNet, even though I had some connections, I still was very new to the space. Like
Hmm.
I've never taken action to actually own one, right? It's all knowledge is you can only think and analyze so much, but sometimes we overanalyze things. Analysis for paralysis. So I'm pretty sure you
Hmm.
heard. So that was what's happening to me until I hit these roadblocks of being laid off twice, and
Hmm.
then I took action. But when I took this action, it provided more challenges because I realized I didn't like I realized there's a lot about real estate I don't know about. And so I
Hmm.
picked up the Purple Bible, Rich Dad Poor Dad, everybody else, and read that book, and I learned the importance of leverage and the importance of delegating tasks and stuff like that, creating a team. Because initially when I bought this property, I was very actively involved. I dealt with all the triple T's: tenant, toilet, and trash. And I realized I do not want to be that actively involved. I bought real estate so it could be more passive.
Hmm.
so, so then I read book and educated myself, and I started to create and build a system, delegate tasks to property manager, and manage it. Basically, just more hands off on it. And eventually, I just started thinking, if I can do this for one condo, why can't I scale it to 100+ unit apartment building? And that's how
Hmm.
syndication came about.
Got it. Awesome. Cool. And definitely we'll get into syndication, but just curious, how did you go about building that operating system? Did you just outsource it to a property manager right away, or you kind of found people kind of independently to contract it to? How did you go about that?
So it's like an ongoing thing. You're always, as a business owner, I would say if you own real estate, you are a business owner. You have to treat it like a business, right?
Hmm.
So I'm always thinking of ways to improve the efficiency, right? To
Hmm.
make it easier on me, right? Moving forward. So when you talk about how did I start, well, you can start by, okay, so if let's just say today I have maintenance call, right?
Hmm.
Now I have a list of vendors that I've already vetted, that I've already used, and so forth. That might go to. It's just one text away, and they'll show up on the same day
Hmm.
because I built that relationship, built that trust with all this list of vendors. But this list didn't come about.
Hmm.
Uh, the first day that I owned this property, it came about by consistently, working with them and building that build it and continue to find some people that I can trust, right?
Hmm.
So it gradually happened as time goes on. It didn't happen overnight. So as we're always looking for ways to improve the operations,
Hmm.
it happens, like week after week, month after month, year after year, until you build it to the point where you don't even have to do anything now. Like it just runs
Hmm.
itself, which is awesome, right? Even though there might be a problem here and there, you've already built the system to handle it. And so I have a list of vendors. For this unit, it's pretty close to my home, so I'm still managing it myself.
Hmm.
But like big like syndication, I have a property manager company managing. So yeah.
Got it. Interesting. So it's happened just over time, like building these relationships, always thinking about how to get more efficient, where it gets to a point where ultimately, not perfectly, but it seems to run itself, and any small issues, you just kind of go in and solve things really quickly. Does that sound accurate? Awesome. Cool. Interesting to hear about that. So back to something you were saying earlier, said kind of through your initial property, you wanted to scale it and ultimately kind of syndicate it. Can you explain a little more in depth what syndication is in the real estate investing world and kind of how you go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, syndication is a partnership between investors who pool their resources into a single investment. And this
Mhm.
allows you to invest in multi-million dollar deals like multifamily properties, which is the asset class that I'm in, or any commercial building. So, anything, commercial that's office, retail, hotel, motel, 7-Eleven convenience store, those are all commercial, right? So, you can syndicate any of those if you just need to know how to raise capital. So
Mhm.
syndication eliminate much of that risk while sharing the upside. The
Mhm.
property generates an income, and then it gets split amongst all the investors. So it's a win-win situation.
Got it. Awesome. So are there any, when you're doing this, I know one of the things you mentioned earlier, similar to kind of any investment, not just real estate, but kind of splitting the risk and kind of sharing the upside. Like as you're going about the syndication and you're trying to look at properties kind of to buy or whatever, what are some of the things you look at to determine if this property could be fruitful or if it's just not worth the risk investing in?
Yeah, so you got to look at a lot of different things, right? I think as a real estate investor, everybody has to focus on their niche, their market.
Mhm.
Like what are they comfortable in? So I started investing in California, and I started investing pretty much in my backyard. My condo is only 15 minutes away from my house.
Mhm.
So because I know the market, I know locally, right? I know what goes on, what kind of development, and if it's tenant landlord friendly and all that stuff, right? So when you invest, the things you got to look for is definitely the market, what you're familiar with, what you're comfortable with. If you and all the research you've done, right? Does it
Mhm.
have the population growth? Does it have the job growth? Is it politically landlord business friendly? Because those are the type of states you want to be in, right? The red
Mhm.
states. It's not that investing in blue states like here is not going to help.
More
It's not going to.
regulation makes it difficult, basically.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. There's a lot of people that say still make money here, but that's only if you don't encounter problems.
Mhm.
With real estate, if you haven't encountered problems, you haven't been in it long
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah,
You know?
interesting to
So
hear.
yeah, so those are the things you gotta look for, and I would say definitely have boots on the ground.
Mhm.
That's very, very important. If you're investing out of state, if you're investing somewhere that's not local, that's not next to you, you gotta have boots on the ground. And boots on the ground doesn't necessarily mean you gotta have a whole team like contractors, vendors,
Mhm.
brokers, agents, lenders. Not necessary. I'm talking about just someone to look out for your property. Let's say it could be an investor. One of your investors that invest in your deal. Maybe he lives down the street. Maybe he can come check
Mhm.
out the building. Maybe he can help out, right?
Mhm.
Because essentially your investor is your partner, right? You're gonna make him money and if the deal performs. So I'm pretty sure he's willing to do a little extra work or something like that, but
Mhm.
not. It just depends, like the type of boots on the ground you have. So I think that's really important. So you can travel less, you can focus more time on doing what you do best, not
Mhm.
constantly travel to check out the property and manage the contractors. That's not where your role
Mhm.
should be, right? Your role is should be to manage the property manager, you know,
Mhm.
and the people that's running your deal, right? That's helping you. So I think that's very important. And then the third would just be the connection. The connection
Mhm.
is like goes pretty much same thing as boots on the ground. Is if you put yourself out there in network, join mastermind groups, you're going to be able to be connected with people that's also invested in that market, right?
Mhm.
So for example, if I want to invest in Florida, I go out to network and I meet people who lives in Florida, who syndicated in Florida. Those are pretty much all my connections that can benefit me.
Mhm.
We can somehow mutually make a deal that's mutually beneficial for both parties to help each
Mhm.
other out. So that's what I would suggest.
Okay, got it. So you would say one, somewhere that's not too regulated. Two, have an idea, boots on the ground, people kind of a little more familiar with the area. And three, if it's a new area in particular, really try to network with individuals that have done it and kind of try to get into business with them, kind of because they have a track record of doing that. That sound right?
Yep.
Awesome. Sounds good. Another thing to get into, a little more involved in current events, but as I'm sure you're aware of, and this is really prevalent to the real estate industry with interest rates being high, I'm sure makes it a little more difficult to do business and probably acquire new properties. So, love to
Mhm.
know from your perspective what the best way is for kind of current real estate investors or just maybe even home buyers would be to adapt to current interest rate environments and really navigate that issue.
Absolutely. So yeah, when you go to these networking event mastermind groups, that's another thing that people talk about. How do we navigate in this high interest rate environment? Because you
Mm-hmm.
can make money when the market is going up or when the market is going down.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when the market is going down, you're doing dollar cost average. You're investing as it's going down, so eventually it's going to come back up. So either way, as it's going down, you're going to make money. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter which at what point you invest in, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to invest when the market is going down, but while the market is going up, that's the difficult part. Now, deals are everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just have at the end of the day, it just the numbers just have to make sense. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
net positive cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is, and so you have to just look at that overall. And yeah, so we talk about at these events where people typically use things like things that don't require you to get as much loan. So
Mhm.
I'll break it down to simple terms. So like if you're if you're just starting off trying to acquire your first real estate and interest rate's so high, you can
Mhm.
figure out ways of have the seller finance the property, right? Instead
Mhm.
of getting the loan from the bank, you can have seller finance, and seller may charge you a lower interest rate than 6, 7, or 8%.
Mhm.
Depends on the relationship you built with the seller, right?
Mhm.
And then there's also properties like subject to, right? Subject to is another way of not having to have to use a loan in this kind of environment. So there's like little strategies and tricks where you can do so. In the syndication world, we're basically paying for uh, we used to have higher LTV, maybe like between 65 to 70%, but
Mhm.
now we're seeing anywhere between 50 to 65% because of how expensive loan has
Mhm.
got. Because if we don't need to borrow, if we can raise more capital and borrow less at such a high interest rate, then we
Mhm.
can still make the deal work, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise, that goes back to what I was saying. As long as the cash flow is positive, you can still make it happen.
Mhm.
But
Got it.
you have to just basically use less leverage and
Mhm.
use more of it when the interest rate is low. That's why.
Okay. Got it. So it sounds like broadly adapting to the environment, figuring out other creative financing ways when kind of the banks or private credit might be charging very high rates due to the current environment. But the other thing, and some of what you said earlier, just to touch upon LTV, for those who don't know, loan to value ratio, you're talking about like the value of the loan to the value of the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So it sounds like to get a little more creative regarding your financing, and the biggest thing to kind of pay attention to is recognizing maybe that interest rates go up, down, kind of impossible to predict these days, but just trying to maintain positive cash flow and ultimately over time should be more sustainable. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. And just to get into a few of the last things to ask, I know you've built a successful real estate portfolio and you've been on this really incredible journey and have gone through a lot of these challenges, but is there anything that you wish you knew before you started investing in real estate or anything you wish other people should know before dipping their toes in?
I would just say get educated. That's the
Hmm.
most important part. We don't stop learning after school. We s- we
Hmm.
s- we actually that's only just the beginning of it, and that's something that I would tell everybody who graduates from like with a degree like me. For those that's not going to school and they're thriving, they probably had at some point educated themselves about what they're getting themselves into.
Hmm.
Not through school, but through somewhere else. So
Hmm.
I would say that's the most important part. And that's one thing that it's that's why I say I'm thankful and grateful for how my parents raised me, even though
Hmm.
we've always had that friction
Hmm.
of different mindset, different generation thinking, stuff like that. But I, I still hold education very high just because of the continuing learning never stops, and that's that you have to push the needle forward, and you have to move the needle constantly. And so if you stay stagnant, you're pretty much screwed, and
Hmm.
that's how I look at it. I don't like to be living in a bubble. I like to get comfortable being
Hmm.
uncomfortable, so to speak, because that's where the reward is.
Got it. So it sounds like just understanding that what it takes is constant education. There's no kind of one-step solution, whether you're just getting involved or whether you're in real estate. Just always be committed to learning because ultimately that's what the journey is about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I hear this a lot when I was younger, and I wish I would have taken more action because I didn't. It just didn't register in my head. Like, what does this even mean?
Hmm.
Because it's not that I haven't been learning. I've been going to
Hmm.
school. I've been learning what I need to learn, but I've been learning the wrong stuff.
Got it.
Not the stuff that I want to learn.
Hmm.
Not the stuff that's useful to me.
Got
Um,
it.
that's the mistake I made. That
Okay.
I would say.
Awesome. Well, great. I mean, look, I think if a lot of us make mistakes, but I think the best thing we could do is kind of share our mistakes so others don't have to repeat them, and then ultimately, yeah, everyone wins. So I think
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
a great way of looking at it. But a few other things just to get into, a little bit of a higher level question, but shorter question. How do you in your personal life you find happiness?
How do I find my personal happiness?
Yep.
Oh, that's a great question. So I I approach life nowadays with a very giving mindset, giving
Mhm.
mentality. So I think what makes me happy truly is not the money, even though money can help in many ways to create that happiness. I believe what really gets me going, what really gets me up during every day is being able to help others and not just
Mhm.
myself reach financial freedom. And that's another thing that I got into real estate syndication, right? Because I I've been investing in real estate for a good amount of years now,
Mhm.
and my family and friends started to see the results. They're always asking questions about it, and so um, it means that they have an interest, right? They want they want additional passive income as well, and they want to know how to do it, what does it take, what's the mindset behind it, and so forth. So
Mhm.
I think like the ability to give back to everyone who has been like extremely supportive, to help my mentors reach their goals faster, to my parents who made their sacrifice to bring us to the land of opportunities, to friends who believed in me through thick and thin. I'm surrounded by really good people who inspire me to be a better version of myself every day. So therefore the way I give back is by adding as much value as I can to their lives, and that's
Mhm.
what makes me happy.
Got it. It's interesting. I've actually had other conversations about this too. So I think folks say that, if you look at happiness on a scale from really stressed to really happy, I think money can maybe take you to that neutral point where you'll stress less. But I think in order to be happy, money's not going to get you there alone. There's got to be some kind of giving or some kind of you feel like you're adding some value to society. So definitely agree with you on that end as well. Um, Kind of last thing I wanted to get into, really appreciate you taking the time. Are there any other parting thoughts, or is there anything else that you think people should know about your life, about real estate investing, any general life advice? I mean, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would just like to say that earlier I brought up an example of um how I got my first deal, and then I found out that, what are you doing? Why'd you put all your eggs in one basket? Why didn't you borrow? Why didn't you leverage? Why didn't you use bank's money to make more money? If you borrow, you can get tax write off after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So
Mhm.
I think just coming to this part of my life, I feel like you got to look at both sides. There's three sides of the coin, right? There's the head, tails, and the edge. If you can stay on the edge, you get the best of both worlds. Typically, most people, they would think one-sided. They're very one-sided. They're very biased towards their beliefs. That's how they believe in. They're either far right or far left, right? You're not in
Mhm.
between. But if you learn to stay on the edge, which is very difficult for everything, right? Everything if you try to apply that to everything, it's a challenge, I would say. But if you can do that, you get the best both worlds. And what I mean by that is, I came from a saver's mentality, right, which is
Mhm.
one side of the coin, and then there's the other side of the coin, which is the American consumerism, right? Buy, borrow, be in debt, always be in debt, and that's how you make money. And so when you combine the best of both worlds, you stay on the edge, and now I know how to save, and I also how to leverage using good debt to help me
Mhm.
make money. And
Got
but that requires education to understand the other side, right? Because after I understood how to use debt to my leverage, I also learned that there's good debt and bad debt, right?
Mhm.
Bad debt is the credit card bill debt that you got to pay that has really high interest. Good debt is you use that other people's money to make more money for you
Mhm.
to invest in real estate. So that's you just have to get to know on the other side of the coin, and for you
Mhm.
to make an opinion, informative opinion, and basically take what you like, take what's going to benefit you with you to help you with whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. So learn to live on the edge kind of in your life and in your business, and ultimately that should lead to sustainable growth and hopefully success and happiness in general. But overall, Jim, sounds like you've got an incredible, incredible story. Really appreciate you taking the time. Really great advice on just coming as an immigrant, adapting to American culture, and then kind of growing this real estate empire. And wish you the best. Seem like an awesome person. And thank you so much for the time for going on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel.